In April 1912, aboard the most luxurious ship ever built, a teenage socialite named Madeleine Astor became one of the most talked about women in the world, not because of wealth, not because of scandal, but because fate placed her at the center of the Titanic disaster, a tragedy that would soon turn her into the young widow of one of the richest men on earth. She was only 18 years old when she married Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, a man nearly 3 decades older than her and worth a fortune so vast that newspapers of the era struggled to calculate it. Astor wasn't just rich, he belonged to America's most powerful dynasty. His real estate empire shaped New York's skyline. His investments touched railroads, hotels, and finance. Adjusted to modern value, his wealth would translate into billions today. Their marriage in 1911 had already ignited controversy. Society columns whispered that Madeleine was too young, too beautiful, and too ambitious. Critics called her a fortune seeker. Supporters insisted she was simply a girl in love. But no one, not gossip writers, not financiers, not even the Astor family, could predict that within a year she would be standing on the deck of a sinking ship, watching her husband disappear into icy darkness. The Titanic voyage was supposed to be a quiet escape. After facing relentless press scrutiny in America, the couple traveled through Europe and Egypt to avoid public attention. By the spring of 1912, Madeleine was pregnant, exhausted, and ready to return home. They boarded Titanic in Cherbourg, France, entering first-class society at sea. Velvet carpets, crystal chandeliers, orchestras playing after dinner. For Madeleine, it felt like safety. For John, it was routine luxury. For history, it was the final calm before catastrophe. On the night of April 14, 1912, Madeleine was asleep when the ship struck the iceberg. She later recalled feeling only a gentle vibration, no explosion, no panic, just a strange stillness. John reassured her there was no danger and helped her dress warmly. Passengers were told it was precautionary. Many laughed. Some refused to leave the heated salons, but seasoned sailors had already seen the truth in the flooding compartments below deck. As lifeboats were prepared, John Astor escorted his young wife upward. Witnesses remembered him as calm, composed, even polite to crew members while chaos slowly spread. He asked an officer if he could join Madeleine in the lifeboat because she was in delicate condition. The officer refused, women and children only. Astor nodded, stepped back, and helped her in. That moment, barely a minute long, would define Madeleine's life forever. She sat in Lifeboat 4, wrapped in blankets, watching the deck grow distant. She later said she could still see her husband standing tall among the crowd, hands clasped behind his back, as though attending a formal reception rather than facing death. It was the last time she ever saw him. Hours later, the Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic. More than 1,500 people died. Among them, John Jacob Astor IV, multimillionaire, inventor, author, soldier, and now a legend of the disaster. When Madeleine arrived in New York aboard the rescue ship Carpathia, she wasn't just a survivor, she was headline news. Reporters flooded the docks, cameras flashed. The public didn't see a grieving teenager, they saw the richest widow in the world. Newspapers calculated her inheritance obsessively. Some exaggerated, others speculated wildly. The real figure was complex. She would receive income from a massive trust and control of certain properties, but not the entire Astor fortune. Still, even conservative estimates placed her among the wealthiest women alive. Yet wealth did not protect her from scrutiny. Journalists analyzed her clothing, her expressions, her posture. Editorials debated whether she truly loved her husband or had married her for status. Rumors spread that she would soon remarry. Cartoonists sketched her surrounded by money bags. Society treated her less like a human being and more like a symbol. Youth, tragedy, beauty, and unimaginable wealth wrapped into one fragile figure. Behind closed doors, however, Madeleine was not thinking about money. She was 19, pregnant, widowed, traumatized. Night after night, she reportedly replayed the final image of John standing on the Titanic's deck. Survivors often spoke of guilt, why they lived when others didn't. Madeleine's guilt carried a sharper edge. She hadn't just survived strangers, she had survived the man who gave her everything. The Astor family, protective of their dynasty's reputation and fortune, quickly stepped in. Lawyers reviewed the will, trustees organized payments, conditions were established. Her inheritance came with rules, expectations, and watchful eyes. She was wealthy, but not free. And this is where Madeleine's story stops being just a Titanic survival tale and becomes something far more unusual, because history shows that many widows in her position guarded their fortune above all else. They remarried strategically, they invested carefully, they protected their status. Madeleine, however, would eventually make a decision that stunned high society, a decision that suggested she valued something more than wealth. But in 1912, none of that had happened yet. In 1912, she was simply a teenage girl sitting alone in a mansion filled with condolences, legal documents, and silence, holding a future worth millions and a past that would never stop haunting her. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, the Atlantic Ocean was a frozen expanse, eerily quiet except for the cries of those who had survived the unimaginable. Madeleine Astor, barely 19, sat shivering in Lifeboat 4, wrapped in blankets that offered little warmth against the biting cold. She stared at the darkness, her mind replaying the final image of her husband, John Jacob Astor IV, standing tall on the Titanic's deck, composed, hands clasped behind his back as the great ship slowly sank into the depths. That image would haunt her forever. The rescue ship, Carpathia, arrived hours later. Crew members pulled survivors aboard, offering hot drinks, blankets, and words of comfort. Madeleine could barely comprehend that she had lived while so many others perished, over 1,500 souls lost to the icy Atlantic. Among the chaos, she felt an odd mixture of guilt and relief. She had survived, but survival came at a steep price. Her husband was gone, and with him vanished the life she had known, including the security and predictability of belonging to one of the wealthiest families in America. Arriving in New York, Madeleine was immediately thrust back into the public eye. Reporters mobbed the docks, flash photography capturing every expression of the young widow. Headlines screamed, "Richest widow in the world," and society speculated on her next steps. Would she remarry? Would she wield her fortune wisely or fritter it away in grief? For Madeleine, however, these questions were secondary to the emotional turmoil she faced, the trauma of loss, the pressure of public scrutiny, and the responsibility of a fortune she was barely old enough to manage. The Astor estate was immense, spanning real estate holdings, investments, and personal assets worth millions by 1912 standards. Trustees quickly intervened, overseeing the disbursement of her inheritance to protect the dynasty's interests. Madeleine found herself constrained not only by grief, but by legal and societal expectations. Her life had been stolen from her normal adolescence and replaced with an almost unbearable weight: to be the perfect widow, the guardian of one of the richest fortunes on earth, while she was still just a teenager. Despite her youth, Madeleine demonstrated an early understanding of diplomacy and self-preservation. She navigated the media with grace, issuing carefully worded statements, attending public memorials, and maintaining her composure in social gatherings. Yet privately, she wrestled with anxiety and fear. She recalled John's calmness on the deck and wondered if her own composure would ever return. Each night she replayed the sinking, imagining the faces of the hundreds of passengers she would never see again. The Atlantic had not only claimed her husband, but the lives of friends, acquaintances, and complete strangers, leaving a void that no wealth could ever fill. In the following months, Madeleine began to interact more deliberately with charitable causes, finding some measure of purpose in philanthropy. Hospitals, orphanages, and disaster relief efforts became her focus. These efforts were not only a way to honor the dead, but also a mechanism for her to regain control of her life. She learned the delicate balance between performing social duties and protecting her mental and emotional health. The tragedy of the Titanic had left an indelible mark, but it also forged a quiet strength in her, a resilience few could have expected from a teenage girl who had just witnessed the death of one of the world's most powerful men. Yet public fascination with Madeleine's life remained relentless. High society debated her choices, critiqued her attire, and questioned her mourning practices. Cartoonists caricatured her, depicting a young widow surrounded by piles of money. She was no longer just a person, she had become a symbol of wealth, of loss, of the fragility of life, and the enduring fascination of the public with tragedy. But behind this public image, Madeleine faced the profound and private journey of learning to live again without her husband, without certainty, and with the weight of the world's gaze upon her. In the months after the Titanic disaster, Madeleine's life became a careful balancing act between public expectation and private grief. Though only 19, she was now one of the wealthiest women alive, an unimaginable position for someone so young. Trustees monitored her finances, societal leaders scrutinized her every action, and the media speculated endlessly about her future. Every decision she made, what to wear, where to go, whom to meet, was analyzed and often criticized. Madeleine, however, had learned quickly to wield her agencies subtly. She began to make choices that prioritized her own emotional needs rather than merely satisfying social expectation. She attended social gatherings sparingly, wrote letters to charitable organizations, and sought comfort in quiet reflection. Her pregnancy added another layer of complexity, nurturing life while grappling with profound loss. Each step she took was measured, each decision deliberate, as she navigated a world that demanded perfection and spectacle while offering little understanding of the internal suffering of a young widow. Society, however, did not leave her alone. Gossip columns speculated that she might soon remarry, aligning herself strategically with a new fortune. Others accused her of capitalizing on tragedy. Yet Madeleine resisted such pressures. She valued her memories of John, the life they shared, and the promise of their brief time together. Her choices reflected a determination to honor the past while cautiously stepping into the future, not simply to satisfy public expectation or safeguard wealth. Charitable work became an essential refuge. Madeleine used her influence to support hospitals, education, and disaster relief efforts, finding meaning beyond social scrutiny. These efforts also helped shape her public image, transforming her from a figure of curiosity into a woman of purpose. She understood that wealth was not merely a comfort, but a tool, one that could be used to create positive change, even while grappling with personal loss. As months turned into years, Madeleine began to engage with the world more confidently. She formed friendships outside elite circles, cultivated intellectual interests, and developed a private life away from the relentless media gaze. Each act, each choice, signaled a growing maturity, a transition from a teenage girl overwhelmed by tragedy to a woman defining her own identity, independent of fortune or fame. By the late 1910s, Madeleine had settled into a rhythm that balanced duty, privacy, and personal fulfillment. She had learned the subtle art of maintaining appearances while quietly living according to her own priorities. Public life, which once seemed oppressive, became manageable as she strategically chose where and how to participate. Despite immense wealth, Madeleine sought normalcy. Simple activities, walking in parks, reading quietly, hosting intimate gatherings, became her respite. She remained committed to philanthropy, finding purpose in helping those less fortunate. The Titanic tragedy had left deep scars, but it also imparted resilience. Madeleine approached life with a careful but unwavering determination to honor the past while embracing the present. Her story inspired fascination. Society marveled at how she balanced youth, beauty, grief, and fortune. She was a living paradox, a woman who had seen tragedy up close, yet managed to cultivate grace, purpose, and strength. Friends and acquaintances observed that despite her wealth, she valued human connection above all else, often placing personal relationships and experiences above financial considerations. In essence, Madeleine had begun to reconstruct her identity, No longer just a rich widow, she was emerging as a symbol of endurance, courage, and emotional intelligence. She had survived disaster, navigated public scrutiny, and started to reclaim autonomy over her life, a journey that would continue to define her as she moved forward. As the years progressed, Madeleine faced one of the most remarkable decisions of her life. Unlike many of her peers, she did not prioritize wealth in choosing companionship or lifestyle. Her experiences aboard the Titanic and her subsequent widowhood had reshaped her values. Love, personal connection, and emotional fulfillment took precedence over material gain. She eventually remarried, but carefully, with consideration of emotional compatibility rather than strategic advantage. Her choice shocked some in society who expected her to align herself with fortune or status. Yet Madeleine's decision reflected a lifelong lesson she had learned amid tragedy. Wealth can be inherited, but genuine connection and the freedom to live according to one's heart cannot. Madeleine's story, therefore, is more than a tale of Titanic survival. It is a story of resilience, emotional intelligence, and deliberate choice. She had survived the iceberg, public scrutiny, and personal loss. She had inherited one of the greatest fortunes on earth, yet chose to shape her life according to principles beyond wealth and fame. Today, historians regard her as one of the most remarkable figures emerging from the Titanic narrative, a young widow who faced unimaginable tragedy, navigated societal pressures with grace, and ultimately chose a life defined by personal meaning rather than material wealth. Her journey continues to inspire, reminding the world that even amid unimaginable loss, one can reclaim agency, pursue love, and live a life of profound purpose.